Hi guys, so today we're going to be working on creating this inverted cube kind of effect in Blender. I'll walk you through the process. It does get a little bit longer than I originally intended, but I think it still is worth watching. I think it's a fun effect to get. There's parts you can skip to that just show the node tree if that's all you're interested in as well. So thank you very much. All right, everybody, so here we are in Blender. I am going to demonstrate how this is created. The modeling, I don't know any of his social media handles. The original modeling was done by someone called IDJ on one of the Discord servers I'm in. If I find out any of his socials, I will credit him for the original idea in the comments or in the description. But anyway, it was nothing too crazy complicated, so I think we can figure it out. I think we can do a couple things differently than what he did originally, and I think we can streamline the process a little bit. So first we're just going to hit create new general, and instead of deleting the default cube, we are going to delete part of the default cube. So we're just going to delete this back face here, and maybe this face. No. Yes. We're going to delete this face, so we're just left with this kind of like isometric cube here. And then what we're going to do is Shift-A, add another cube, move that along the y-axis, scale it along the x, a little bit more, just get a little bit skinnier, scale it along the z, until basically what we're going to Boolean out a bunch of holes in the side here, like you see in the animation in the beginning, just because it adds like kind of a dynamic effect with non-inverted colors coming through in the background. So what we're going to do here is first we're going to apply an array modifier, and we're going to move this back a little bit. We're just going to see how this lines up first. So move this back a little bit more, add another array modifier, maybe lower this, add one more. Kind of center that there. That's center enough. We're not going super detailed with any of this because it's going to be a quick tutorial. So what we're going to show now is changing the array modifier, editing it so that it has that kind of cascading effect that we had. So we're going to apply the array modifier. We're going to tab into edit mode. We're going to select the vertices, or actually faces will work. We're going to turn on proportional editing. You can click this little menu at the top, or you can press O on your keyboard. We're going to change that to constant, and then we're going to scale Z. Oh, wait, no, I meant sharp. So I'm doing a little bit of a different effect than what he did. He did kind of like sharp or like steps. I would prefer to do kind of like this kind of effect, as you can see here, like just a sharp, clean line along the bottom. So what you could do if you wanted to do the sharp steps is, I don't believe you can do it with proportional editing. I think you have to do it like manually, so you would just scale each individual the group or link of the object as scale it on the z-axis, but that gives you a little bit less control, and it ends up with less of a uniform look unless you're very careful about it. So anyway, here we are. So this is what we've got now. So then we can go here. We can add a Boolean modifier, and then we can hide this. So what we're going to do is apply this Boolean modifier, hide this array, and then in edit mode, we're going to select these faces. So hide this. We're going to press 3 so that we can view all the faces. We're going to turn on the X-ray so that we can see all of the faces. We're going to select all of them, and then we're going to press X. Now, we could keep the faces in for now, but we're planning on using a solidify modifier on the rest of the mesh later. So that doesn't really work for what we want to do. And then we press Alt-H to bring the plane back, turn off X-ray mode. I'm sure there's a hotkey for that. I do not know it. And then we're going to apply a solidify modifier. And we're just going to apply some positive thickness. Not a lot, just a little bit, just so we get some nice edges. And then what we're going to do is apply the solidify modifier. We're going to tab into edit mode again, and we're going to select all of the faces on the inside of the mesh that will be facing the camera. There's a couple ways that you could do this. You could just select these materials or these faces and assign it a new material. But the way we're going to be doing it is using the back-facing data on the, like achieving the blackness on these parts is by using the back-facing data running into a color ramp in the shader node tree. So we're going to press Shift N, and we're going to press recalculate normals is going to show up. We're going to click on the little drop down, and we're going to click inside. So then now these normals are facing into the mesh. So if we click on the overlays icon at the top, and we click on this little display normals icon, we can see now that the normals on the parts we just flipped are facing inside the mesh, which means they're now back facing towards the camera. So that is helpful. Tab out of edit mode, and this is the modeling done for the cube. Like I said, easy, quick, nothing too complicated. Then we're going to add a plane, mesh plane, scale it along the Y, just make it like nice and long, nice and planey. Scale it along the X. Rotate it along the X-axis and the Z-axis in order to just angle it a little bit. And then we're just going to move it behind the cube here. And then we're going to switch transform orientations from global to local. Just because once you've oriented this object in a weird kind of way, that gives you an easier way to control it. It moves along its own local axis as opposed to the global axis, which is easier for what we're about to do, because we're not going to use an array modifier. Actually, we're going to use an array modifier at first, and then we're going to just duplicate it. So yeah, that's what's happening here. So then that's what we can see right now. As you can see, it's nothing too exciting. We're going to press G and X and just move this to the edge of the camera right here. We're going to add an array modifier set to -1. And then we're going to set that to 6. The reason we're going to set that to 6 is because we're just going to duplicate these 6 objects and move them along the local x-axis again. So then we're going to apply that. We're going to tab into edit mode. We're going to press P. We're going to select by loose parts. So we can see from the camera that's what's happening here. So then before we duplicate these materials, we want to assign the materials. So switch to your, also we've got to be in Eevee. Perfect, we're in Eevee. So there's a couple, we'll talk about this later. So go into your shading editor and press new. So this is essentially, this is all we're going to do. Like, we're going to add some noise textures and stuff like that to the colors just so that they are a little bit more dynamic looking. So the first thing we're going to do is a noise texture. We're going to do a color ramp. We're going to plug the color into the factor. We're going to plug the factor into the color. Actually, what we're going to do first, well, no, because what we could do is plug this into the factor of a mixed shader node and control the colors from there. I'll show you what that looks like. So plug this into the factor, and then say change this color, and then we can see the texture showing up. But it's for this purposes, we're not changing this into like we're not grouping this together. We're keeping it as is, so it's not anything like, you know, more complicated. So then here I have Node Wrangler enabled, so that pop-up there was I clicked on the noise texture and I pressed Control T. I think it's Control T. And that lets you scale the texture. I'm an idiot. I had Control T pressed again, and it created a duplicate mapping node right on top of the original mapping node. So it was working, it just was plugged. The right vector node wasn't plugged, or right mapping node wasn't plugged into the vector. But anyway, so as you can see, I've just changed the scale on the X or the Y and Z axis. The X axis, you can stretch it a little bit like that. And then you can just play with these settings here. So I am going to go with like predominantly more blue than black for this color. And then we're going to actually switch this to 4D. We're going to leave this W at 0. And then we're going to select all these. We're going to press Control C. We're going to go to the next material. We're going to press Control V. Oh. Okay, don't know why that didn't work, but it didn't work. So we're going to change this color back to this like soft kind of sandy color. We're going to change this. We'll lighten this up so that it has kind of a more sandy kind of value. I like the look of like the high contrast kind of things, especially for the Eevee stuff, because we're going to be working with bloom a lot and ambient occlusion, so it's going to look really good. So we're going to change this W to 0.1. And then just same thing, Control C, and then go to the next one and Control V, plug that into the color, change the color to suit your needs. We're going to change this W to 0.2. You can change these W values to anything you want. I'm just changing it linearly so that it kind of has an effect, like it lines up a little bit. It doesn't really, but it kind of creates some flow. But yeah, so that's what we're doing there. It just generates a new pattern. Don't ask me specifically what it does, but that's what it does. It changes the pattern of the texture. Next one, Control V, plug it in. Perfect. So this is going to be the basis of our material setup. So we're going to change a couple settings. I'm going to drop the roughness almost down all the way. I'm going to raise the metallic up almost all the way, and I'm going to do that for each of the materials. Not all the way, because all the way gives too much of like a metallic effect. But with the setup we're going to do for the world settings, then this is going to look, the reflections are going to look amazing with just like some roughness still and mostly metallic. So that's what we're working with so far. I kind of like the look of that. I think that looks fun, especially when we have the lighting set up. And we're going to actually delete this point light. I forgot about that. We can keep the camera where it is, delete the point light, because the point light will mess up our rendering. So we're going to go into edit mode. I'm going to rotate this a little bit. Rotate Z. No, rotate Y. Rotate X. Z. Sorry, I am sometimes working in familiar or local orientation can be a little bit challenging. So change it back to global for this. Rotate the cube a little bit more. Bring it back. And then change global back to local. So we have all these objects selected. Press Shift D to duplicate, and then press X to scale or move it along the X axis, and then just Shift D again, and then X. And there you go. We have our background set up. So now we need to go into our material settings. Also, we're going to duplicate these guys in the back again, and just move them the other way, just so that we have some extra wiggle room if we want to like pan the camera around more and stuff like that. You don't have to line it up perfectly as well. That's not what this is for. Okay, so then in our render settings, we have to enable bloom, ambient occlusion, screen space reflections. Under the screen space reflections, you have to enable refraction. You have to go into your object settings, and under screen space refraction, make sure that's enabled. And then what you're going to do is raise the transmission all the way to 1, drop the roughness to 0, and you're going to change the IOR to exactly 1. And that's basically it. You could stop here, essentially, if you wanted to stop here. We're not going to stop here. We're going to do a couple things. So the first thing we're going to do is we will invert the colors, which we're going to look for a shader to RGB node. We're going to use the color data from this. We're going to grab an invert node. We're going to grab another principal BSDF and plug that into the color. Okay, and then part of why it's not quite working is because of our world settings currently. So it's, if we go into the object settings and we raise this up, then you can see it works a little bit better. That's also why we're going to be doing this custom background. So we're going to leave this at 1 for right now. But first, we're going to finish setting up our. Actually, no. You know what? Let's do the world first, because then it allows you to see a lot better. So we're going to add a color ramp here. You can change these colors to anything that you want. The color that was originally used in the project was like a blue and orange. It had a nice contrast, and then you can also raise up the contrast here. And then add a texture, a noise texture, plug the color into the factor, press Control T. And then there you go. You just got to make sure it's plugged into the mapping node, and then your actual thing will show up. I like to raise the scale on this a little bit. I raise it to about 10. And then you can bring these closer together or farther apart for more contrast or less contrast, which is a nice little touch. There's a lot of control in this scene, which is nice. And then what we got to do is bring this strength up to 2. We're going to dial this color back a little bit because it's a little bit strong as it is. We're just changing the background right now just to get kind of a better effect. Okay, so if we raise up, you can see the higher we raise this value, the more inversion we see from our cube. So I kept it about 2.5, I believe, on the original. So it'll make more sense when you see the completed node model. So we're going to switch back to object. We're going to plug this color, this invert color, into the emission. And there we go. So we're going to drop that emission to maybe 0.5. 0.2. Let's raise it to 2. No. And a lot of doing this kind of thing is just like working and trying to find colors that work and trying to create new new kind of contrasting images and stuff. So this is what we've got so far. It's not bad. It's a little bit too, yeah, you'll see what I mean. So we switch back into object mode, select this object. What we're going to do is add an input. We're going to add a geometry input. We're going to add a color shader, or sorry, a color ramp. We're going to add a color ramp. We're going to plug back facing into this this color ramp, and then also again, make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. It comes free with Blender, so just look up Node Wrangler, Just click that box, and then it should be enabled. And then Control-Shift-Click on the color ramp. And so we're going to invert this, basically. So we're going to drag the black value all the way over here. And then we're going to plug this into the base color. And we're going to plug this also into the factor so that it only inverts the white parts, which is what we want because we want that kind of black beveled effect behind it. There we go. So that's what we've got going on. I'm going to turn down the bloom settings a little bit. I'm going to raise the threshold. I'm going to raise it to 2, maybe 2.5. 2 is good. Maybe drop the intensity. We'll raise the intensity up a little bit. Okay, so this is where we're at right now. So it's not exactly what we were looking at before, but that's okay. It's never going to be the exact same thing. Also, we want to change this to constant. As soon as it loads back in, you will see what I mean. It doesn't affect much. It's just easier for us. And then we're going to add another input node. We're going to add a camera data. Nope. Yes. No. We're going to add a, sorry, I forgot what the light path node. Okay, I was using the wrong node. It's not a light path node. It is a texture coordinate node. That, oh, no. And then we're going to plug the UV into the factor of this. And there we go. So we're going to change this to constant. And we're going to add another white shader behind it. And also, we're going to tab into edit mode. We're going to select all. We're going to select Smart UV Project. We're going to press OK. Because that's going to change where our lighting kind of shows up. Basically, for this part, just play around with the settings until you find something you like. Like that's all I can suggest is just, because basically what this is going to be is this is going to be our, you have that like glossy tint effect on some of the glass. This is going to be that. This is going to be the part where it's like it looks a little bit glossier than the rest. I kind of like that. I think that'll look good. So then what we're going to do is add a color mix RGB node. We're going to plug this into this, plug this into this, plug this into this, set this to add, Control-Shift-Click. And then you can see now that there's just certain gray parts. And then we're going to add this so that it's the factor. We're plugging this color ramp into the factor so that it only adds this to the white parts. And then that's how we get that kind of gray effect, because we don't want it to be solid black, but we don't want to change that value in the color ramp because we still want that data to be the same. We just want it to go through the mix, like the mix color node, the mix RGB node as an add node so that it just lightens up or darkens down the white areas a little bit, because that's going to create that glossy effect. So then we plug this into this. And it'll load in a minute. There we go. So it's broken a little bit. That's okay. We kind of expected that. Okay, so I figured out why it wasn't working. I was plugging the wrong factor. So you got to plug this color ramp, the bottom one that's plugged into the back-facing properties, into the factor of the invert node. And then, so what we can do also is add a math node. Set to divide. And I didn't do this in my original setup, but it will allow you to soften the colors a little bit up so it's not quite the same harsh. If you want the harsh contrast, don't leave them, or leave the math node out. If you don't want the contrast, like if you want something more like this, then do not leave the math node out. Okay, so we're also going to change our scene settings to a square, just because that adds a little bit better of an effect. We're going to select all these guys. We're going to press M to move them to a new collection. And that collection, you can call the collection whatever you want. I'm just going to call it Color Planes. Okay. It just makes sorting it out a little bit easier. There's not much to work with in this scene, but you know. So we're gonna scale it along the Y. We're gonna press Control A and scale. And it stretched out our textures a little bit, but you know what? Tell you what, we'll scale it. Also, we're still in. I'm pressing Control A to apply scale, by the way. So that's important for when you're scaling any objects in Blender. Okay. So we're gonna go back to this guy. We're gonna turn down the emission a little bit because it's a little bit too strong. I think we're gonna change this guy's color because we're not quite. So a lot of this effect is just getting the right colors that work. So we're gonna like. We're going to raise this up. We're going to change some colors just so we get some more contrast, because that's the biggest thing that makes this effect work is contrast. So we're going to change this sandy color to maybe more of a like a really bright pink, like a purpley pink. And then that's still a fun aesthetic. It's still a fun color, but it's just a little bit more contrast on the cube itself, so it's a little bit more exciting to look at. And this is a different color scheme than the one I originally did, but it works just as well. So then also in the world settings, let's just drop this to 2.5. That's a little bit too low. Let's say 4. 4 gives us a good effect, and then we can go back here. We can raise this back up to 2.5. And then we get this nice bloom effect from the cube itself. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So all you're gonna do now is we're gonna go into, we'll go back to layout mode because it's a little bit easier to work in. All I did was to make the animation was created an empty plane axis, select the camera, shift select the empty, press Control P, select object, make sure you're on the first frame, rotate it, switch back to global orientation, rotate it along the Z axis as far as you want. And then rotation, I did 72 frames because that loops really well. So you just basically, actually, we're going to delete this keyframe because what we're going to do, just to make sure that it's even on both sides, just pressing Control Z a few times. We're going to rotate Z minus 30. Yes. Insert keyframe. Rotation. We're going to go change this back to 72. Going to go to frame 72. Rotate it Z. We want to rotate it 30 degrees from the positive, so we're going to rotate it 60 degrees positive. And then we're going to press rotation. And then when we watch it in preview mode, it does this. And to loop it back and forth, I just did that in Premiere Pro. I won't walk you guys through that this time, but this is how you created the basic effect. It's nothing too complicated. Let's tell you what, let's create these. Let's switch this back to local. Let's Shift D and Y to scale these along the bottom. Just line it up roughly. There we go. It kind of creates like a mirror effect as well, which is kind of neat. And tell you what, let us select these again, Shift D, X. And remember, we're working in local orientation mode, so it's going to be you're not transforming along the global axes. I don't know. But yeah, this is the effect. It's fun. It's a fun little, we have the gloss showing up kind of on the surface there, and it's a lot of fun to do. So yeah, it's not super complicated. You saw all the node trees and everything like that. So just one sec. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and please like, comment, and subscribe.